My name is Lana Malmsheimer, and I'm here with Larry Wilson, and we are going to do an interview on behalf of the LGBT Center of Central Pennsylvania History Project. Today is November 16th, I believe, and we are here for the oral history interview. This interview is taking place at Larry's home in Harrisburg. Do we have your permission to record this interview today?
You do.
Thank you. Would you state your name and spell it?
Larry Wilson, Larrywilson.
Okay. So, tell me a little bit about your past. Tell me a little bit about growing up. Where did you grow up? What was your family of origin like? Just what you think about your childhood and youth.
Okay. I was born in 1950 in Huntington, Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And I was one of 5 children, 4 mm-hmm. boys and a girl.
Wow.
In a very small town of about 8,000 people.
So everybody knew you guys.
Everybody knew everybody. And we were fortunate enough to grow up next to a schoolyard. So mm-hmm. we had plenty of friends, our kids our own age, that we could play with. And so there were a lot of activities, a lot of outside playing, a lot of interaction with other kids. And it was a fairly normal existence for a family of the 50s. The way it used to be, yeah. Both my parents worked, my father full-time, my mother part-time, to help bring in money to support a large family like that. But they were very supportive of us and very caring, and it was a great family and a great neighborhood to grow up in.
Were your brothers or sisters older or younger than you?
I have one older brother. I have 3 younger brothers and a younger sister.
Oh, so there are 5 boys.
There are 3. One older brother,
One.
2 younger.
Okay,
yeah, one
there we
older,
go.
2 younger brothers, and my sister is the last one to come into the family, so
okay.
she's the youngest.
Okay. Growing up, were you in a religious family?
Yes, pretty much so, but not over the top. Mm-hmm. We were required to go to Sunday school every Sunday, which I did until I was old enough to figure out that I could just leave the house and not actually go to Sunday school, and then I would go off to a friend's house who did not go to church or to Sunday school class. But it was nighttime prayers every night, but not an overly religious family. It was a part of our life, but not overly done.
May I ask what church?
Lutheran church.
Okay.
I grew up in the Lutheran church, was baptized in the Lutheran church. I was confirmed in the Lutheran church when I was 14.
How old were you when you would do that?
I was confirmed when I was 14, which involved, I think, 2 years of confirmation classes with the pastor of the church. Mm-hmm. There were 7 or 8 of us in my particular class, so it was a rather extensive weekly gathering of learning the Bible and learning what the church was all about.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall any conflict with religion as you were growing up?
No, I didn't have any conflicts with the church or what they believed in. Like anybody else, I had my doubts about what I was being taught. I was a very independent thinker from a very early age, which creates a nightmare for your parents. But it was I was I accepted what they taught me, but I didn't necessarily believe it. I'm the type that I found out later that I need proof of some type of proof, and it doesn't have to be tangible proof, but it could be a life experience proof about whether things are true or not.
Okay.
And that's been true throughout my existence.
Okay. Growing up, as you became aware of your own sexuality, how did that go?
That went very well because since in the neighborhood there were 3 or 4 other kids my age going through the same thing, you were able to go through that together. In that it wasn't uncommon to spend time at friends' house and you were playing what, in essence, doctor or experimenting or show and tell.
Sure you were.
And just about every boy in my neighborhood around my age experienced that in their early adolescence. And this went on from age probably 11 to age 13, something like that. And it was just, nobody thought anything of it. Nobody put a label on it. There wasn't, to us back then, especially in a small town, there wasn't anything known as gay or homosexual.
Okay.
It was a non-existent thing. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody talked about it. Now, as you got older, and talk of homosexuality would come out in conversation, and rumors about people in town. Then you learned what it was. But during the expiration of sex days with us in my neighborhood, it wasn't something that we were aware of. And we didn't put a label on it. It was just playing around.
So was your first awareness positive or negative? Or?
It was very positive.
Oh,
I
cool.
think we all enjoyed doing what we were doing. There wasn't any repercussions of it. There wasn't any, years after us doing that, there wasn't any uneasing. It was something that we did together, and it wasn't anything that we even thought about after we stopped doing it.
So this is a substantial group of gay people, or
This is a substantial
group of explorers?
This is one gay person, and who didn't know he was gay, and all my straight friends who just were experiencing life in general. And it was a normal part of growing up between the age of 11 and 13.
And educationally, where'd you go to school? And
Huntington Area High School. I graduated in 1968 and went then to college, actually a technical school. Back in 1968, my interest was getting involved in computers, which was something that was relatively new back then. And a lot of the colleges and universities didn't have degree programs. So if you wanted to learn about computers, if you wanted to learn about how to operate them, how to program them, you had to go to a technical school. So that's what I did. In 1968, I started at a technical school in Harrisburg called Thompson Institute, which was located down at 4th and Market Street. Downtown Harrisburg. So that was my first introduction to Harrisburg, and I fell in love with it as soon as I got here. It was a 18-month degree program, or a diploma program. There were no degrees back in those days, in computer science anyway. So at the end of that 18 months, there really wasn't anywhere for me to go in terms of job or further education. unless I wanted to go to a four-year college and get a degree in an unrelated field or semi-related field, business administration or something. So what I did was, we were in the middle of the Vietnam War and everybody was being drafted, you know, and I lost my school status, so I was up for the draft, and that draft notice came shortly after I completed my 18 months at school. So when I got my draft notice, there was no way I was going to be part of the infantry in Vietnam, so I joined the Air Force.
Okay.
And got into a delayed enlistment program, which gave me an additional 120 days before I had to report for basic training. So in September of 1970 is when I entered the Air Force, and then was there for the next 4 years, and was fortunate enough to be selected while I was in basic to go into intelligence. And so from basic training, they sent me to a six-month school learning the ins and outs of intelligence, both military intelligence and intelligence such as going on at NSA, National Security Agency, which is where I ended up when I got out of school.
Okay.
And so during that time, not only college, the 18 months at technical school, but also in the military, there was still this gay undertone that was repressed, and I was aware of it, but there was never any thought of ever acting on it. Especially in the military, when you go into something like intelligence, you go through a very strict background check for your security clearance, and you have to go through a lie detector test, and they specifically ask if you are a homosexual, which I answered no, because I had never actually, in my mind, engaged in a homosexual experience. But it was really in the military that I became more aware of what being gay was and who was gay around me. And there were people around me that were in the same situation I was in. There was never any discussion about it. There were rumors about people, but rumors can get you kicked out of intelligence very quickly, especially if you're at NSA. So it's something that allowed me to spend a couple of years just formulating what that meant to me in my mind. And coming out of the service, I think I was more ready to come out, although I didn't. The one thing lacking in my life, and this goes back to my early childhood days in school and growing up in Huntington, Pennsylvania. There were no gay people in Huntington. There was one gay person in Huntington. Everybody knew who he was. He was very effeminate. People talked about him. He was very isolated. He had no friends. He worked at the newspaper as some type of copy editor. To me, that's what gay was. It's my only observation of somebody that was gay, and it was my only reference point to what gayness was. And I knew I wasn't that. So therefore, I'm not sure what I am or even how to go forward with this. So that's the reason that it took me until I was 26 years old to actually realize and accept the fact that I was gay and to do something about it. And even then, it took a personal experience to actually allow me to come out. I had a close friend. We were a very large, tight-knit group of people, but very accepting of everybody, and we had a large group of friends. And we had one friend that my other friends started talking about that they thought he was gay. And I said, he doesn't act gay, he doesn't look gay, why do you think that? And they said, well, he's living with another guy. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. They've been there for a year, but there's only one set of bedroom furniture. And the other bedroom's empty. It's just got boxes and junk in it. So that made me think. Now, I had a lot of respect for this person. I really liked this person. Possibly even sexually attracted to this person. So it gave me a reference point to now what maybe this new gay was, and I could wrap my head around it and say, yeah, he is like me. So finally, I was able to see somebody similar to myself that didn't show outward gay stereotype things that I could relate to. And that's what brought me out.
Step back for a minute. When you go into the service and after you're trained, what did you actually do?
In the military?
Yeah.
When I was sent to NSA, I was fortunate enough to be put in the operations center.
So you were in the NSA as an Air Force?
Yes.
Okay.
NSA is staffed by half civilian, half military.
Okay.
For the military, it was anywhere from an 18-month to a 3-year assignment. And I was thrown into the heart of the operations center, where what we did, and none of what I talk about now, and I didn't talk about it for 20 years, but none of what I did and what I can talk about now is confidential anymore. It's
okay.
Well known. Everything that went on in that operations center and how we did it is documented and has been released to the general public. But what we did was we monitored all of Europe and the Far East in terms of military activity. We tracked every plane in the sky, troop movements, and we looked for Russia sending off ICBM missile tests. We look for any kind of border violations for one plane to another. And anytime something happened, we were there to issue some type of an alert that would cause a military response, whether it be a scrambling of aircraft or whether it be making a base in Germany or Japan or Alaska aware of what's going on and put them on a higher alert. Mm-hmm. So that's basically what I did.
Did your computer education feed into that in any way?
It did not. It went back to that 6 months that I spent in military educational training in Texas. And we, on a daily basis, it would be a little bit like a cop going to work, where he never knew what was going, but there was always something going on, and something was going to happen. So it was fun, it was exciting, you felt like you were accomplishing something, and it was a very rewarding job. Because of my background in schooling in computers, I actually was able to work in what was called the war room, which was the room behind the operations center, which was the nerve center of all this activity. And I was the liaison between the operations center and the war room, but primarily I worked in the war room. It was just me and a captain that were in charge of that. We had rotating shifts that we worked. And so it was just this captain and myself. I was a sergeant then, so it's just the two of us that basically ran the war room. But it was part of our job to make sure that all this information that was coming in got put into the computer, got fed into the computer so that we could do analysis later on. So it was a fun job.
So at that point, you mentioned that the Vietnam War was proceeding. So
Yes.
you would be looking at important information there and that sort of thing?
Not relating to the war in Vietnam. That was handled by a separate group, a much smaller group, but they specifically worked on just Vietnam. We had special groups within NSA, although we covered probably 3/4 of the globe. Cuba had their own intelligence area. It was a very small group, but they were focused just on Cuba. We had a group that dealt with just intelligence in Vietnam. I don't know how large that group was, but it wasn't an operations center such as ours. And there may have been other small groups that came and went as things would develop in the world, but I wasn't aware of them. We were busy covering Far East and Europe.
So you finish your tour of duty in the military and move into a civilian job in the NSA, is that correct?
A lot of people did, and I actually thought about doing that, but as much as I enjoyed what I was doing, I wanted to get back to Harrisburg. I wanted to have a different life other than the military. And
where was this located?
NSA is located right outside. It's located on Fort George G. Meade in Maryland.
Okay.
Closer to Baltimore, but between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. And so I did talk to them about a full-time job when I got out, and I was offered a job, but I ultimately decided I wanted to go back to school. I wanted to get my bachelor's degree, and I really wanted to work in computers. And I felt that working in computers in the military, even in intelligence at NSA, I would be restricted in the kinds of things I would be involved. I wanted to design computer systems, and across many different areas of business.
Basically an engineering sort of approach.
Yes, and I didn't feel that I could get that kind of experience or job satisfaction working at such a small segment of the military that dealt in just intelligence.
Gotcha.
I wanted to be involved in a lot of different areas, and corporate America offered that to me more than the military did. So I got out, I went back to school. I had to go, I think, 2 semesters to then finish a 2-year associate degree. And then
Where did you do that?
I did that at Bagot-Thompson Institute. They were now had a 2-year degree program, and you could get an associate degree, which allowed me then to transfer to Penn State. And so when I went back into the civilian world, I did the school for 2 months full-time, but then I got a job working as a computer programmer, and then did my additional education on my bachelor's degree at Penn State. I did at night and on weekends.
So were you in State College then?
No, I chose to stay in Harrisburg, and they had opened the Middletown campus, which was engineering when it first opened, but they had, while I was in the military, they had expanded that into computer science, business administration, and some other areas. So that's what I did. I went to Penn State, Middletown campus, which allowed me to stay in Harrisburg, and I loved Harrisburg. and I wanted to stay here. I loved the people, I loved the city, and to go back to State College meant going back to Huntington as well, because they're right next to each other. And there was no way I was moving home or even that close. I was 100 miles away, and I liked that.
And by this time, you're out.
And by this time, I still am not out, because I'm still processing all of this.
Okay.
It was another 2 years before I came out. It wasn't until I met this one other person that was rumored to be gay, and that I, for the first time, could have somebody to relate to and say, yeah, I'm like him, as opposed to I'm like other people that had been pointed out to me as being gay. So it was, yeah, I was almost 26 years old when I came out.
Did you have a relationship then for a while?
No. I came out with this person, and he was in a relationship, so therefore could not help me take what little experience and knowledge I had and to do anything with it, other than he told me where there was a gay bar in Harrisburg.
And what was that gay bar?
And that was the Dandelion Tree on 2nd Street, which then became, John Koch bought it, and it became the La Rose Rouge, which was the oldest gay bar in Harrisburg, going back as far as we can tell into definitely into the 50s, and even maybe into the 40s. It was a gay bar at that same location. Different names, but same location. So,
And at this point, we're in the mid-70s roughly.
and we are in 1976. And I was in a fairly committed relationship with a girl at that time. I had always had girlfriends my whole life. And the fact that I was gay never interfered with that. Although if she had a brother, that was cute, I always made a point to become his best friend. But other than that, I was in committed female-male relationships up until 1976, and even into the first 3 months of me coming out, I was still in a relationship with her. I would take off on a weekend and basically not tell her where I was going, and I would go down to a gay bar. She thought I was seeing somebody else on that night, seeing somebody on the side or something, and I was just exploring the gay bars of Harrisburg, which was not a good experience. I was scared to death. I didn't have anybody that I knew in there that I could talk to. I didn't know how to relate to the people that were in there. I felt very uncomfortable.
Can you explain why?
No. To this day, I can't explain why. I struggled for about a year as to what being gay meant to me and what it meant to my life, because I didn't have a clue. My whole life has been pretty much going down a track that I prepared for and I controlled. And this was something that was, for the first time in my life, that was out of control. I had no control over the gay feelings that I had, or the acceptance of myself being gay. I didn't know how it impacted me personally. I couldn't rectify that in my mind. So going into these bars, and I found out years later that the people in the bars aren't necessarily, you're not going to find necessarily the people in the bars that are like you. It depends on what type of person you are. But I observed from a distance, holding onto a beer bottle with dear hands, because my hands were shaking so bad the entire time I was in there. I was scared to death. I didn't want anybody actually coming up and talking to me, although I wanted to feel like part of the crowd. I knew that I wasn't. In my mind, I didn't think that I was. A few people that did come over and, say, "What's your sign?" Which was what they said back in the 70s to meet people. I tell them Scorpio, and that's end of conversation. I didn't know how to carry on that conversation beyond, and didn't feel comfortable talking to people. It was a good year before I came. And this created turmoil in my life also, in dealing with this girl that I was seeing, because I didn't feel I was being honest with her. This affected, it didn't affect my job, because when I go to my job, I'm focused only on my job, and I put any kind of personal issues to the side. But it affected that ride home every night, that ride going there. Once I got home, it was something I thought about every minute of every waking day. And I didn't know how to come to terms with it. And it took me a year before I actually got comfortable in my own skin, where I had met a few people that were actually into sports, followed football, other things that we could talk about. And, generally they were people outside of the bar back then. A few people asked me to go to private cocktail parties at people's homes or to fundraisers, and I started to meet gay people that way through, one acquaintance after another. So the bars didn't help me come out. It was the people that I met outside of the bars. I was in the board of directors of the Doshi Center for Contemporary Art back in the 70s. There were two people that were on the board of directors that were gay. At the same time I was. They helped me a great deal. They didn't know that they did, but just introducing me to other gay people and inviting me to cocktail parties and to their home. These were people that hardly ever went to the bar. Some of them had never stepped foot in a gay bar. Back then, there weren't many options, and gay bars for gay people, they weren't even thought about. They were a place where people went to pick up somebody. That's how they were viewed by 90% of the gay people of Harrisburg. Only 10%, my estimate, of gay people in Harrisburg had ever even stepped foot in a gay bar in Harrisburg. So that's what eventually allowed me to become comfortable with myself, as I found people that were more generally like me. Most of them were corporate people. Some of them were attorneys, some of them were doctors. They were people that are involved in the corporate world, which was something I'm now heavily involved in as I've moved up the ladder in my own profession.
And who are you working for then?
At the time, I was working in Red Lion, Pennsylvania, for a company called Flinchbaugh Products. I had gone in there as a programmer analyst and had gotten promoted to programming supervisor. And so, I was, getting more experience and working up the ladder of what was my profession. Was designing more corporate computer systems then. And I then also started meeting people through those contexts, through computer user groups, which were all companies that had similar computers, realizing that there were gay people there. So, now I became comfortable with who I was and what I was. And I had dated a couple of guys, but they never really took off. I didn't feel any real connection to them. But then I met somebody, and it happened to be in a bar, that I related to, and he hardly ever came out, but he happened to come out that night. We hooked up, and we ended up together for the next 8 years. We moved in together, and that was in 1978, I believe. So that was my early coming out. It wasn't a very pleasant experience, and to this day, I still believe, I listen to my friends today that grew up in the 60s and the 70s or even the 80s and talk about how easy it is for these kids today, and that they are accepted in school, and they don't have to hide it, and there's more of them out. And I believe many of them go through some of the same issues that I do. And that hasn't changed. It may be a little easier to come out, but it doesn't become any easier internally to accept yourself. For many, it is easy, I'm sure. As it was for many people maybe back in the 60s and the 70s. But I believe that many struggle to this day. Things like the LGBT Center and the gay switchboard, over the years has helped a lot of these people out. But still, it's an internal traumatic experience that puts your life in turmoil for any number of months or years until you rectify it in your own mind. So,
Were you out to your family then?
No.
After you came out?
I came out to my family probably, it was after Matt and I got together, and we were moving in together. We talked about it. We'd been together for about 6 months, and we were considering moving in together, and I felt it was time to sit down and talk to my parents about it. Now, just prior to doing that, about a year before, I had to go to my parents and inform them of another crisis in my life, and that was that the girl that I was seeing had gotten pregnant. So this new crisis of me being gay is on top of that, which contradicts the first one. So the reaction from my parents, who said, "We always knew," was a little bit puzzling because, wait a minute, a year ago I was sitting here telling you my girlfriend's pregnant. So, and that we had decided to get an abortion, which is the only regret that I have ever had in my life. And if I could go back to do it over, I would never go through, have an abortion, agree to it or anything. It's my one only regret in life.
Wow.
But, so I went to my parents and I told them basically that I was gay and that I was seeing somebody. And, my mother immediately out of her mouth is, "I always knew." My dad immediately out of his mouth said, "I never liked Anita Bryant anyway." And, so they were very accepting, at least on the surface at that time, of what I was telling them. And, but I know from, years later that it wasn't as easily accepted by my mother as it was by my father. She had a real problem with it on many different levels. Primarily, it was her concern for me, that I would not have a normal life, that I would not, family is most important to them and even to me, but their concern was that you're not going to get married, have children, they're not going to grow up and have grandchildren like we've had and like your brothers and sister will have. You're going to have a lonely existence. That's what they felt, which hasn't been the case. But this was a concern on her part. My dad, on the other hand, years later, and after seeing how he's taken this information and processed it and reacted to it over the years, my father, if you would ask him, he's glad I'm gay. He likes that I'm independent, different, my own person, that I'm not like the others, that I take charge of my life, and he has on many different occasions told me how proud he is of me for the life choices that I have made. And if you asked him if he had the ability to go back and change my sexuality, would he do it? He would say absolutely not. He'd say, I'm happy about it and my son's happy about it. There's no way that I would change that. I think he likes the fact. Yeah. How
about your brothers and sisters?
It was a non-event. I don't know how, we never talked about it. I mean, it's come up in conversation because I started bringing my partner to every family event, and he became part of the family. They accepted him, but there was never any discussion. My parents, their job was to tell my siblings, and, so it rarely comes up in conversation, and it's more of a side issue than anything else. But they've accepted it, and it has nothing to do with my relationship to them.
Any problems with your extended family?
No, none. Not that I've ever heard or been ever made aware of. Later on in life, I learned that I have two cousins that are gay, one on my dad's side and one on my mother's side. And they are very gay. And, the family doesn't seem to have any problem with them. You'd have to talk to their immediate family to know how they feel about it, but there doesn't appear to be any negative effects from that. I don't know that all of my extended family knows. It's not something that my family talks about. It's none of their business. Those that are closest to the family, yes, they are aware of it because they were part of the family gatherings that Matt would be at, and they knew we were a couple. But I don't know that everybody in my family knows about it, and I'm not open about it, and I'm not open in general in my daily life about it. I've never told anybody that I've worked with or worked for or who has worked for me that I was gay. It was never something that I wanted anybody to know, in terms of my job. And I've actually been criticized by close friends because of that, because, their feeling is that I could be a role model for other people in the corporate world that, that look up to me, and they could say, well, and he's also gay, and so therefore here's a success story of some sorts, and this is what a gay person can achieve, but I didn't want anybody in the corporate world to know that I was gay. I wanted, when I was up in front of the boardroom and talking to the people that were in the room, and explaining to them the problems that existed and how to resolve them, I didn't want anybody sidetracked by the fact that they were looking at me. And part of the thought in their mind was, oh, that he's gay. Whether it's a positive, oh, he's gay, or a negative, oh, he's gay. Yeah, I wanted them focused on what my purpose in that corporation was, and that alone. So I never told anybody. And I've been very private about it. I've never told any neighbors. I'm sure all of my neighbors and wherever I've lived have known, at least suspected, but I never and we never had a conversation about it. I never felt that it had anything to do with my relationship to them as a neighbor. And some of the neighbors I got very close to, but there was just never a conversation about it, and I was very private about it. And I do understand the criticism that not only I have taken, but other people that have high positions in corporations have also taken. I understand the importance of people coming forward and being a role model for everybody else. I mean, we have gotten to where we are today because of the Rock Hudsons of the world, because of, you know, the Tim Cooks of the world, you know, that have come out over the past decades. I mean, they were part of society accepting us as being a part of society. But I'm not here for that purpose. Okay. I can't provide that role for the LGBT community. I got a different role. I don't know what it is, but it's not being a role model for other people.
So your first relationship lasted
8 years.
8 years?
And it's the only relationship I've ever had, full time. I've interviewed a few people for the position, but I've never gone on to have a second full-time relationship.
Was that a good relationship?
That was a good relationship, and he and I are still friends to this day. It was an eye-opening experience for me. In terms, now you have to understand that I didn't get into this relationship until I was 28 years old. And that, you know, by the time you're 28, you're fairly independent and, you know, you have your own way of doing things and your own life to live and how you want to do it. And it's difficult to, you know, all of a sudden become one as a partner with somebody. And in those 8 years, it was a very good relationship, and we had a great partnership, and it was a great experience, but it's not for me. And it was years after we broke up, and basically I walked away from the relationship after 8 years, and I never understood why, because I still loved him. But I walked away from the relationship after 8 years, and it took me another 10 years before I ever figured out why. There's something internally in me that every 7 years has to completely change their life. And number one, I don't ever want to do to somebody else what I did to Matt when I walked away from our committed lifetime relationship. So I just chosen not to enter into that kind of a relationship since then. And quite honestly, I'm happy and have been happy ever since the two of us broke up to be single. Like I said, I've dated people, and in some cases for, you know, months at a time, for 6 months, for a year, but they were relationships that were safe for me. They were married guys. They were people that weren't looking for a committed relationship from me. So, and that's worked well for me. And for some reason, I don't need that emotional togetherness with somebody to complete my life. I understand the people that do need that. I think it's that's normal. You know, what I experience and what I feel, I think is less normal. It's a smaller percentage of people like myself that feel that way. But I would rather be, you know, single, and, you know, I live my own life. I do what I want, go where I want, And I've led this incredibly blessed life. I have many times, and my dad and I have had this conversation, I don't know why I've been so lucky, why I've been so blessed with a profession that I enjoy, a group of family, in my family that, love me and I love them back, and we don't have any huge conflicts, which I know happens in so many families. I have a group of friends that I love dearly and that love me back. And I've had ups and downs in my life, but they've been small little bumps. And I don't know why I've been so fortunate and so blessed in my life. I do not have an answer for that. I keep waiting for the ball to drop and for me to have a really horrible next 20 years just to offset the incredible 65 years that I've had. And I'm okay with that because I've gotten way too much, and I've just been very happy. But I've done it alone and without a partner, and but I have friends that have been together, many friends that have been together for 30, 35, and 40 years. Committed relationships and very happy. And it's wonderful to see.
So then you leave the relationship and you are a single man living out your life for the rest of your life. At that time, you're still working in corporate America?
Yes. Still working in corporate America. There was, however, about an 8-year period where I took a sabbatical from my profession. And I decided, and this was in 1980, I decided that, and I guess this was at the end of one of these 7 years that you have to revamp your life and completely change everything, that I decided that I wanted to go into the bar business. The bar business is something that has interested me going back to my days at Thompson Institute in 1968 and 1969, where I was going to school with draftsmen and architects, and I had this idea that someday I'd like to own a bar. And so I even got to the point where I sat down with them and we drew up plans about what this bar would look like. So the seeds were planted back when I was 18 and 19 years old. When I came out and became a part of the LGBT community, I wanted to do something to be a part of that. And I didn't know what that was at first, but I wanted to be an integral part of the community and do something for the community. So instead of volunteering my time at a, crisis center or something like that, I decided, wait a minute, I've always wanted to go into bar business. I'm looking for something to completely change my life. So I'm going to go into bar business, and that's what I did. I bought a bar on 3rd Street in Harrisburg, and I opened up Harrisburg's third gay bar. At the time, there was just a Neptune and the La Rose Rouge down on 2nd Street. That was John Coke's bar. So I opened up a gay bar, and the first night I opened it, the doors opened and people flooded in, and that never stopped. So it was a success from day one. I had been warned ahead of time that by doing this, possibly I could affect the existing 2 bars, because there were only X number of gay people in Harrisburg that frequented the bars. And if I took 50 people out of the other 2 bars, that was 50 people that weren't there to support them. I didn't believe that. I felt like a mall. If you put a lot of stores, more people will go and shop there. And so my hope was that more people would come out. And ultimately, that's what we saw. We saw the gay nightlife in Harrisburg go up 50% based on the fact that there's now a third bar. And we were all within walking distance.
What was the difference in the bars?
There was
Well, wait, one
absolutely
minute.
no difference in the bars whatsoever. They were all identical. They were mirror copies of each other. They had different owners and different bartenders. It was the same clientele. They all looked alike. They played the same music. They offered the same drinks. There was no difference in those bars whatsoever. But at that point, there was no other objective other than, add to the quantity as opposed to quality, which allowed me to spend the next couple of years thinking about, where can we up the game from here? Where can we improve the quality of the bars? And in the meantime, a bar in town, a nightclub in town opened up called Class 1. Class 1 was a New York style disco that was a straight run club. It started in Susquehanna Township on Hoffman Street or 6th Street uptown here, close to Susquehanna Township line. And after a couple of years moved down to Cameron Street. What they did on a Monday night was they offered gay night, which they opened their door on a slow night, a Monday night, and they did this from the day that they opened as a nightclub. They were gay owners.
What year?
This was
Early 80s?
about 1980, 81. Yeah, maybe 1980. They offered gay night on Monday night. Now, you have to understand, this is a huge facility. Even the place up here on Hoffman Street, on the weekends, they would put anywhere from 700-800 people in that club. When they moved to Metron 2 years later on Cameron Street, now you're talking about 1,000 people that they could put in there on a Saturday night, Friday, Saturday night. So they offer gay night on Monday night. Well, who goes out to a gay bar on Monday night? It's the slowest night of the week. You walk into any of the gay bars downtown, you walk into all three of them and you can get a head count of less than 25 on a Monday night. Not a good night. It's a work week. You have work the next day. Who can come out on a Monday night? It's crazy. But they started this gay night on Monday nights, and within a couple of weeks, they had a crowd in there on Monday night that equaled a crowd in there on Saturday night. There were 800 gay men in there on a Monday night. Now, wait a minute. I've been told all along that there's only 150 people in the gay bars in Harrisburg on a Saturday night that are even available to come out to the bars. So why all of a sudden is on a Monday night are you having 600 to 800 people in this, club up here? Okay, well, to me, that was a wake-up experience in that the people of Harrisburg, the gay people of Harrisburg, are crying for something like this, okay? Now, it had been thought, for the past 4 decades that the gay bars in Harrisburg have to be dark, dingy, and have to look a certain way, dumpy, and, they have to be run a certain way. There were strict rules that you had to follow. And this made no sense whatsoever, but it was a wake-up experience in that this is what the people of the gay population of Harrisburg once. So that told me Harrisburg can take another full-time gay bar much larger. So I started looking around and inquired of the place 2 doors down from me, which was much, much larger than my little place. And in 1980...
I'm not sure I know the name of your small bar.
The small bar, when I bought it, was called the Chateau, and it was located at 704 North 3rd Street. When I bought it, I called it Shadows, because in keeping with this, philosophy of gay bars and being dark, I wanted, this is, when you go in there, all you see are shadows in the distance. But what I told the general population of the community, shadows meant that this bar sat in the shadows of the Capitol. So that was my, general explanation for the name to anybody outside of the gay community that asked. But in 1983, I decided to go to something much larger. And what I was really interested in running as a bar was a dance club. And this is what I had always wanted, but I wanted to start small. So I bought the St. Moritz at 714 North 3rd Street, opened it up, and essentially opened a dance club. Now, in the meantime, some other bars had also opened in Harrisburg. Up on Forester Street, Emil French had opened a bar called La Cage, which then morphed into a name of Pegasus. The next owner called that place. And so now we have 4 small, and Al Kochek now was running the Strawberry Inn down in the square, which was gay on the weekends and on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. So now you have quite a few gay clubs in town, and all pretty much within walking distance. So this new place of mine just sat in perfectly. You had much more people coming out now on a Saturday night. You still didn't have a dance club, but you had at least a lot of options available to gay people. So more and more were seeing options that were right for them, and they were coming out. So I opened the what I called the Archives in 1983, which was a dance club on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. And during the week, I wanted this club to be more than just a gay dance club. There were some things that I wanted out of this club that I felt the gay community really needed, okay? One, that was a business that appealed to everybody in the community, not just the gay community. I wanted a mainstream gay bar that straight people went to, and for whatever reason, okay? So how do you get them in the door? Well, you offer it as a restaurant during the week. You open at lunchtime for the state crowd. You offer it in the evening for a nice dinner, for happy hour, for state workers, for the businesses. Merrill Lynch was next door. They come over every night. And so that's what I did. I partnered with a gentleman by the name of Ed Meals, who owned a small restaurant on 2nd Street in the 1500 block of 2nd Street called the Box Office Restaurant, who was filled every Friday and Saturday night because the food was so good, and it had a large theater and gay following that would go in there, and they had a Sunday brunch there on Sundays. So I talked to him about, and he always was complaining that he didn't have enough space. He only had like 10 tables in there. So I said, would you like to go in with me on this? You take care of the restaurant, the food, I'll take care of the bar, the nightclub, and it'll be a perfect mix, and we can have this essential business that can serve both all of the citizens of the Harrisburg area. And he was all for it. So that's what we did. And there were some other changes that I felt needed to be made within the gay community that were on my mind from the day I came out, and that bothered me. We were a gay bar community downtown of white males, period, okay? There were 8 to 10 lesbian women that were allowed in, that were accepted as part of the crowd. There were 8 to 10 black men that were allowed in and that were very much a part of the crowd. There were no drag queens. You were only allowed to dress up on selected gay holidays. You know, Halloween, New Year's Eve, if you're having some kind of a presentation, a show or something. But other than that, transsexuals other than one person were not allowed. And these were rules that were strictly enforced by the management, by the owners and by the bar managers. And I talked to, over the years, when I first came out, I talked to them about why this was so. And their answer to me was, it's business. It's a business decision. I have nothing against, drag queens. I have nothing against black people. I have nothing against lesbians. But if you let them come in and you don't filter them and keep their numbers down, they will take over the bar. They were convinced of that. And this is what they grew up believing. So, this was a business decision to what they felt was protecting their existing clientele, to preserve what they had, and to protect their financial interest in the business as well. And also, this is a kind of bar that they wanted to run, that they could relate to. So that was one of the things that I felt needed to be changed as well. So when I opened the archives, I eliminated the rules about who could come in, and I let everybody in. And there are many different ways that, the bars prior to me opening, kept these people out. You would ignore some of them. Some of them you would ID them, ask them for an ID. They could be 60 years old, but you ask them for an ID, say, I'm sorry, you don't look like your ID. I can't serve you. But generally they would ignore somebody that walked in the door. But I'd been in the bars when somebody would walk in of this type of person and walk to the back of the bar, and I watched a bar manager one night turn the music down, almost completely off, and get on the loudspeaker and said, I'm not serving any drinks until that person back there leaves the premises. You are not allowed. I mean, they got very rude to people that would come in the door. If they didn't know them and they weren't part of the accepted exceptions, you weren't welcome in that bar and they would not serve you. And the law backed them up. In the liquor industry, you have the right to refuse service to anybody for any reason. That's Pennsylvania Liquor Control Board rules. So I opened it up, and blacks started coming in, females started coming in, drag queens started coming in, and I allowed them to stay, and we served them. And my closest friends told me, you can't do that. They will take over the bar. And they said, we love you to death, but we cannot support you if you keep doing this. These are my friends. But they cared about me, and they were trying to warn me what will happen. Well, it never happened. And, you know, I had straights that would come in there, and, you know, the girls got along fine in there, and there was no problem. And after a year or so, I don't think there was any remembrance of, you know, the way it was years ago. I mean, everybody got along fine, and nobody took over the bar.
So that opened up the other bars as well?
No, not so much. Well, possibly a little bit. A little bit, maybe. It wasn't until Stallions opened and they adopted kind of the same philosophy that it became more universal. And they actually even started having drag shows. Then the Neptune was having drag shows. Of course, Lily White and Company was now a very accepted drag show because it was fundraising. And, you know, so... you know, the old rules and the old regime started to go away, and the new owners and the new management started coming in, and so it's a thing of the past. But nobody was more prejudiced than we were, white males, back, you know, prior to 1983. I mean, it was horrible, the way people were treated. And you would think that you'd understand prejudice is wrong on any level, but for some reason they didn't get it. And but it was a business decision. That's how they looked at it.
So how long did you own the bar?
Until Stallions opened up, and he opened the top 3 floors, and it killed my business.
Oh. And that would be when?
That was in 1988, 87, 88. And they're still in business. Nobody could compete with them. I mean,
because of the space?
Because of the space and what you're able to offer. I knew it was coming, and I tried to do something about it. I had 3 floors. In my building, the 2nd and the 3rd floor at one time, it was a hotel, rent as a hotel, but, you know, it was legislators that lived up there, you know, and it was basically a rooming house. I wanted to renovate that. In fact, my partner who owned the restaurant was an architect by trade, and we designed what the new archives would look like. And we needed a couple $100,000 to do, you know, and this was back in the mid 80s. We didn't have that kind of money. We didn't have access to it. We didn't have credit lines that we could get that kind of money. I did talk to one person that I thought would be interested that did have the money. And I talked to him and his partner about investing in this concept that we had. And I told him, I said, you know, somebody's going to come along and do like a Metron or open a multi-level, and it's going to put me out of business. And so I want to be that person to do it. But nobody was willing to take that kind of a chance, and I don't blame them because there were no guarantees associated with putting that kind of money into a club that you're going to get it out.
So how many years did you have
It was about 8 years.
Archived?
2 bars combined, it was a total of about 8 years.
Why archived?
The archives, we wanted to do it as kind of mirroring what was in our neighborhood. We were right across the street from the state archives. We were right across the street from the William Penn State Museum. We put decor in place that we put fake file cabinets in the walls that looked like, you know, an archive. It was very tastefully done. My partner did a beautiful job with it. we went to the archives. We told them what we wanted to do. They worked with us in getting pictures of Harrisburg. We had pictures on the wall that they, helped make for us. Large photographs of Harrisburg going back into the late 1800s. Gorgeous pictures that we had professionally matted and framed and hung on the wall. Absolutely incredible pictures. And we wanted to represent, what we were to the neighborhood around us. And we wanted to be a part of Harrisburg, and we wanted to be a part of the community. So, it was all about Harrisburg. And, we wanted to carry that theme not just through the restaurant during the day when we were dealing with the state, but also at night for dinner and Sunday brunch, and even, for the dance club. And that's what that theme carried through the entire time that we were in business. So that's where the name came from.
So did you go back to corporate America?
Yes. Immediately went back into my profession. I went to work for a consulting company in Lancaster. They liked the fact that they liked my resume and what I had done in the past. And part of that was when I went in the bar business, I was a systems engineer for Sperry Univac.
Okay.
So they liked the corporate experience that I had, the types of businesses that I had worked with. And they also liked the fact that I had been in business for myself. And they saw that as being an advantage on my part because I could bring to the table what it was like to be in business and to have the business itself as being forefront in the decisions that are made. Mm-hmm. And so they picked me up and hired me immediately. I mean, I was without a job for 2 weeks. I interviewed with them and they just snatched me up.
And how long then did you stay there?
I stayed with them. It was two brothers that had started this company. And when I went to work for them, they had only been in business for about 5 years. So they were relatively small and just in the York, Lancaster, and Harrisburg area. And so when I came in as a technical partner that would go in and design computer systems or help solve problems that manufacturing companies, inventory control companies were having, and help solve those problems and put systems in place that would allow them to solve the problem and make their business run smoother. So I was with them for 10 years. And in the meantime, they wanted to expand into Philadelphia, into Baltimore, into Tampa, Florida. So one time I was doing consulting work for the mayor of Lancaster. And we were coming back from meeting with city council and the mayor and the business administrator. It was myself and the one brother who was the CEO. And we were walking back. Our office was only 2 blocks away. And he said to me, would you be interested in helping me open an office in Tampa, Florida? And I said, yes. And he said, well, how much, upfront notice do you need? And I said, 24 hours. And he said, okay. So he and I opened this office in Tampa, and we opened an office in Orlando. And by now, this business is, when I went to work for them, there were 8 people like myself. When we opened the office in Tampa and Orlando, there were now 100 of us like myself.
This is the period of time when computers are taking over business, in effect. growing and growing and growing.
You didn't do anything in business without a computer. I mean, all of your solutions, all of the way that you are going to run your business is based on the technology, the computers that you have behind that business. There are no business decisions that are made without the computer being a part of that, in many cases driving what that decision will be. So, and what they decided to do was to sell the business to this huge, national chain, and that's when I went out on my own and started my own consulting business.
Okay.
So,
and are you still doing that?
No, I retired many years ago, but that's what I did then the rest of my time working is I worked for myself and would bring my own team in to solve whatever problem needed to be solved and design whatever systems need to be done. And sometimes that was a 6-month contract, but in many cases it would drag on for years because once they would get me in the door, they would come up with another, thing that they knew that I would be interested in, anything to keep me there. So, and I would design my team around me to fit whatever the needs were. The people, I didn't hire employees. The people that I hired, I made go out and become an S corporation, and you are now a separate business. I'm bringing you in on a contract for 3 months, 6 months, whatever my needs are. And if I need you beyond that, okay. If I don't, but I'm going to pay you more than twice anybody else will, for you to go along with that. And so everybody was on board. And it allowed me to pick from all the talent pool that I had seen from the different organizations I had worked with. And it didn't matter where they were in the U.S., I could bring them in to Charlotte, North Carolina, if they lived in Pennsylvania, or if they lived in Florida, or if they lived in Texas. And I would bring them in on a contract. And many of the people that I brought in worked for me the entire time I was in business.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that's going through a period of time in which business is nationalizing as well. It's becoming that kind of thing.
Yes. It was a centralized corporate that they were looking for, okay, we have satellite offices, we have satellite manufacturing facilities, we have different warehouses that we ship our inventory from and we store it. We need a global solution. We get supplies, raw material from India, from China, from England. We own manufacturing facilities in Ireland, in Argentina. So we need systems put in place to become us, so that we can be globally responsive to the needs of the business. And that's a lot what we did back in those time frames. And these companies, many of them, had good people working for them, but in many cases didn't have the expertise to do this kind of problem. And the only alternative for them was to look at IBM or to EDS or to Arthur Andersen in consulting, Ernst Young consulting. And these people were hundreds and hundreds of dollars an hour for each person, to bring a team in. And they brought in a whole structure and a whole team, millions and millions of dollars. They bring me in, I'm a lot cheaper, I do the same thing, and you'll get the same solution. And that's why a lot of these companies didn't want to let me go, and they kept coming up with reasons to keep me there. But they kept me busy, and they kept, a lot of other people that work for me busy on contracts, on an hourly basis for years. And it was a very rewarding job, and it was, yeah.
So I want to step back once more and go back to your bars. I know the bars were involved in some other kinds of things, like volleyball and that sort of thing. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. The bars really, up until when I went into the bar business, really weren't involved in sports, or they didn't have teams or anything. And so one of the things that I did, even when I first opened Shadows, I had a group of friends and we played volleyball, recreational volleyball on the weekend. And there was a core group of guys that got really, really good at doing this. And then we started doing it at the Salvation Army during the week. And it was also a social thing and anybody could come play. But there was still this core group of guys that had gotten really good that wanted to form a team and play, in organized teams. So what we did was we got involved in the Lower Paxton Township Volleyball Association, which is probably the largest volleyball networking group in the Harrisburg region. And they have A teams and B teams, and each one has probably 10 to 15 teams in each group. And they have summer leagues, they have winter leagues. So we got involved in that, and what I decided to do, I didn't want to sponsor them as a bar though. What they wanted to get the name of the bar out there and everything, and I didn't want them to be tied to any particular business. Every one of those teams had a bar, a hardware store in their back, insurance company. But I wanted the team that I had in there to be independent and not to be obligated to any business, not have any ties to any business. And so that's the way we operated it. And then when I moved into the archives, a couple of the guys on the volleyball team actually bartended for me, and we would have fundraisings in there because we also got involved in the North American Gay Volleyball Association, and we played in an international as in Canada and I guess it was just Canada and the United States, but international. And they had invitationals, once a month in some city, either in Canada or the US. So, we would send these guys, raise money and send these guys to compete in those leagues. So we were doing on a weekly basis the Lower Paxton Township volleyball teams, and then whenever these teams would play in the invitationals, we would send that same team to there. So I supported them as an individual. I sponsored them as an individual as opposed to a business. So it's kind of looked at that the bar supported it because I was behind them, but it wasn't the bar, it was me, and they had no ties to a given bar. Mm-hmm. But no other bar ever picked up on that and did the same thing, unfortunately. I would have liked to have seen that get expanded to bowling, softball, baseball, but it never happened.
Is it still going?
No. The group that I had disbanded in the late 80s, it was after I got out of the bar business, and things sort of fell apart, and
Well, you're going through the period when AIDS is emerging there at that point. Did it have anything to do with anything?
Yes, it had everything to do with everything. It affected the bars, it affected the bar business, it affected my friends, it affected my volleyball team, because I had 3 on the volleyball team that were HIV positive. It was in every aspect of my life and everybody else's life. made a huge impact. And there isn't anybody that lived through the 80s that didn't go through that with somebody close to them, that their best friend, your closest friend, didn't die. I mean, because if you got AIDS, you died. Up until 1990, 1994, after 1994, about 1995, they started coming up with actually medication that you could survive. I lost two of my friends, one of them, my best friend in 1994, who was on the volleyball team, and I had been friends with since I first come out. He was one of the people that I first met that I could relate to, and we're just like each other, and we like sports, and we can talk about normal things and not talk about gay stuff. And he and another friend of mine died. He died in Labor Day weekend of '94, and that was the last friend that I had that died as part of the AIDS crisis. I had other friends that were HIV positive that died over the years, but they succumbed to the disease just because they had had it so long, or but medications after 1994 were becoming effective, and up until then it wasn't. So it was, and I was there whenever this started. It was called the gay disease when it first came out. Everybody was convinced that you got it from the fact that you were gay and that you sniffed poppers. It was that combination somehow that caused the disease. We didn't know. I mean, we didn't know what caused it. We just knew it was kind of gay related. And in fact, they called it GRID, before they called it AIDS, and it was a gay disease. So, it's funny. It didn't impact the being in the bar business back then. It didn't impact the bar in that you saw less people. And I don't know that it impacted people hooking up, back in the 80s, the bars were still used for picking guys up. It was more of a social thing, and part of your life. And now it was more couples that came out, and it was more of a good time. But there was still the pickup aspect of the gay bars back in the 80s. And I don't think AIDS affected that. But we watched literally hundreds of our friends die from AIDS.
Did the business participate in confronting that crisis?
There was nothing we could do. We were helpless. Back in those days, we didn't know what caused it. We didn't know how to fight it. We didn't know what we could do to help, except be there for our friends and be with them when they died, and to help them out financially. And that's how we contributed. It was one person, after another that we would take on. There were friends. We didn't have time to take on other members of the community. We were dealing with our own friends. We were trying to help because they couldn't work. They had no income. And there was nothing we could do. Fortunately, also in the 80s, Harrisburg as a whole responded by putting together a group that started helping these patients out and whatever their needs were. That group initially was called SCAN. It was the South Central AIDS Network. But again, other than, sitting on that committee and being a part of it, or contributing.
You mean founding SCAN?
Pardon me?
You mean founding the group that's founding SCAN? You were part of the group that was...
No,
Oh,
I was
no.
not. No. I knew the people that were involved in it, but I was not. What I was able to do was to give them a place to meet once a month. So I offered the banquet room on, I think it was Thursday nights or something like that, free of charge. And and they could use it for whenever they want. And they would have periodic meeting as well when they get together, or a small committee would group. They always had a place to go, and they had that room. It was available to them at any time at no charge. But I could do that, and we could contribute to the organization because one of the things they needed was money, because they provided money to AIDS patients. They provided health care, they provided contacts. Contacts were huge. If you could find a doctor that would treat you, that was huge. And that network was able to provide a doctor's name that would actually see you. I mean, Kerry Cummins was one of few doctors in the area back in the 80s that would see AIDS patients on Front Street. If you could provide the name of a funeral home for your loved one that would take the body after your loved one died, that was huge, because nobody would take them. They didn't want involved in dealing with the body. They didn't want the stigma associated with, treating the body, having it on the premises, because, back then, just having the body in the building, could infect the entire building. They didn't know any better. So this group provided support on every possible level. We had fundraisers for that we could do. Lilly and Company. I can't say enough for what Lilly and Company formed as a group specifically to help scan and to help AIDS patients. What Paul Foltz and that entire crew, which was made up of many people, 10, 15, 20, 25 people, the time that they devoted to putting on these events and practicing for them, and the money that they put in for the outfits and the stage props, and everything they did came out of their pockets, all for raising money for the AIDS network in Harrisburg. That's how we got through that time period. It was, through the support of organizations and people that stepped forward. And John Folby, who was part of the state and was, and working at a state level, and provided state level support and contacts. There were a lot of people, nameless people, to this day that nobody knows they even existed, but yet the contributions they made were endless.
Yeah, that's a rough one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I need to look at our list here.
Okay.
We're doing pretty well, and we are well beyond an hour and a half.
It's you're a good prober. You're a good interviewer.
Oh, that's one thing I wanted to ask. Were you involved in other organizations?
The only organizations, no, I've talked about the organizations that I belonged to. I was very much involved in the arts back in the 70s and the 80s. And I was on the board of directors of the Doshi Center for Contemporary Art, and still have a love for that organization. It still exists today within the walls of Susquehanna Art Museum. But I'm not involved in the art community at that level anymore, nor do I have an interest. Was involved in sports in that we had the volleyball team, and we were able, that was great because we were able to participate in the straight world with that team, and we were able to participate in the gay world in that team, and so that was important as well. The only other organizations have been work-related. They were different corporate user groups, that I got involved with that have both a local affiliation and a national affiliation. But I'm not involved in any organizations, or have I been involved in any organizations in the past 10 years, nor do I have an interest. I've been asked to be involved, on different levels. I feel that I can contribute more as a patron, more as a contributor, a love of that organization, as opposed to be sitting on a board or sitting in some type of position.
Mm-hmm. So we talked about the AIDS crisis. Were there other important events or turning points in your life?
No. My life has been one adventure after another.
That's cool.
I've lived in Florida. I lived in Florida for 16 years. Who gets to do that? Who retires to Pennsylvania, though, that lived in Florida? That makes no sense to anybody, including myself. But I came back here for a reason, and that was my family. My parents are much older now. They're in their 90s. My nieces, my nephews, grown up. It's important for me to be, and I love Harrisburg. I have always loved Harrisburg. Even when I lived in Florida, I hated Harrisburg's winter, but I still love Harrisburg, every part about it. The people, what it offers, it's an incredible city. This whole area is incredible, and I don't want to live anywhere else. But there's only one other event in my life that I haven't talked about that is probably made more of an impact on my life than anything else ever in my life. And that was, I said I come back here for, one of the reasons besides my parents was for my nephews and my niece. I have two nephews, and I had one niece. And after I moved back here, my one niece was killed a week before her 18th birthday. And it was my sister's only daughter, and it was at the prime of her life. And it had a profound impact on me on more than just a level that I lost a niece. It changed the entire chemistry within my body. Something happened to me internally after that I can cry at the drop of a hat. Prior to that, I could go through all kinds of stuff and not be emotional about it. And that after that happened, I can be sitting down here watching the news, and they have a uplifting story about something, somebody did something in Missouri, and tears will come to my eye and stream down my face. And that never happened prior to Amanda being killed. And it was a senseless death in that she was in a friend with two other girls. She was in the passenger side. The other two girls were in the back. The driver was 19 years old, and she had just started working with this guy, and he had a car, and they were out joyriding, and they weren't wearing their seat belts, and he decided he wanted to scare the girls. So he went a back windy country road and came around the corner and flipped up on an embankment, came down on the roof of the car, and they were all ejected out of the car, and then the car was hit head on by a truck. She was killed on impact. The other two girls, less serious injuries, and he got out with a scrape, and that was it. But it was senseless, and but that to see what my family went through, to see what my sister went through. You know, you hear a parent talk about what it must be like to lose a child.
I've done that.
To lose a child to a parent is unimaginable, but it's worse than unimaginable. And so that had the biggest profound impact on my life more than anything.
In a way, it kind of emotionally expanded you.
Oh my God, yes. I mean, it changed my entire insides. I mean, it's like all the chemistry in my body changed. You know, all of the emotions, all of my body made up. It changed everything about the way I look at things. It's made me very emotional. I mean, this happened now 6 years ago, and you know, the pain doesn't go away. You know, it just, and you know, my body hasn't recovered from it. You know, the changes that occurred in my body after that happened were permanent. And, you know, that's not going to change. You know, it won't change for my sister, and it's not going to change for me.
Have we missed anything?
No, we covered everything.
Oh, I know one. What changes have you seen in terms of really LGBT life?
You're talking about another hour.
I know.
The changes that I have seen in societies accepting of the LGBT community, I mean, are documented. You know, I mean, there's no information that I can provide that, you know, that hasn't been documented by hundreds of others. But the one thing that I can talk about is the changes that have occurred from the time that the people that I knew when I came out, the people that were gay and in the gay community in the 50s and the 60s, and the changes that they've seen to what they were in the 80s. You know, I mean, I had a guy come up to me a couple of weeks ago at a memorial, and it was to a couple of gay friends that we lost, and we did a memorial for them and got together money for plaques. And he came up to me and he says, "I'm from New York," and he said, you know, some people here in the bar told me that, you know, what you did, you know, in bringing this bar, you know, to Harrisburg, the gay bars in Harrisburg, and, you know, you were in the forefront of you know, all the, you know, back in the day when it wasn't acceptable. And I said, you know, I really appreciate your comments, but I didn't do anything. You know, people before me are the ones that did it. It was John Koch who was, you know, and it was Jim Bortsfield who in 1972 opened the first gay-owned bar, you know, and in a location other than 400 2nd Street, which is where the gay bar had always been. I mean, the chance that he took both financially and personally, putting his life at risk back in 1972. I mean, you know, I mean, that's huge. What I did was just see what he did, and then John Koch did, you know, 5-6 years later when he took over. He was then the first gay owner of 400 2nd Street and called it La Rose Rouge. I said, there was nothing groundbreaking about what I did, but I said, you talk to John Koch and you talk to Jim Bortsfield, who were here in the 50s and were part of gay life. Listen to what they talk about, what the life was like in the bar, where on a Saturday night was dress-up night. I mean, you didn't come out to the bar except dressed up in a suit and tie. You know, this was how you dressed up to go to the bar, you know, in the weekends. And always a guard at the door looking for cops. I mean, you know, and everybody knew the routine that, you know, when the lights switched off and on, that the cops were coming, it was being raided, and that you all had to take a seat because, you know, you were required to sit in a chair if you were in a bar. There had to be a seat for everybody. So, and, you know, if you were dancing, you know, you had to find a woman to dance with, you know, and make it look like it was legit. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know, those are the people that you talk to about the changes that have been made, because they were bigger between the 50s and the 80s than they were between the 80s and, you know, the 2000s. Yes, we can get married now, and those changes are huge. But, you know, personal changes. I mean, in the 80s, you didn't have to hide who you were so much. I mean, a lot of people still did, but, you know, the 50s, you absolutely did. It was a must.
Yes, it was. So I'll ask the same question again. What have we missed?
Nothing. We've covered everything.